like to call this virtual meeting of the Arlington Heights Village Board to order on Monday, July 6, 2020, and ask if you would all please rise and join the Village Board in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Trustee Rosenberg.
Here.
Trustee LaBedz.
Here.
Trustee Schwingbeck.
Here.
Trustee Padovani.
Here.
Trustee Scaletta. Trustee Baldino.
Here.
Trustee Canty.
Here.
Trustee Tinaglia.
Here.
President Hayes.
Here. We are having another virtual meeting tonight, and before I have the clerk call the roll, let me just explain that under the phase 4 COVID-19 restrictions and guidelines, I do not feel it is yet practical or prudent to conduct an in-person meeting of the Arlington Heights Village Board, and so we will have another virtual meeting this evening. We have issued all required notices for the public to allow them to participate virtually as well. And I do see a number of attendees who have already joined us, and they will be allowed to comment on any agenda item and also under citizens to be heard as well virtually. So with that, would the clerk please call the roll?
Trustee Rosenberg.
Here.
Trustee LaBedz.
Here.
Trustee Schwingbeck.
Here.
Trustee Padovani.
Here.
Trustee Scaletta. Trustee Baldino.
Here.
Trustee Canty.
Here.
Trustee Tinaglia.
Here.
President Hayes.
Here. The first item on the agenda is the approval of minutes, and we've got 3 sets to approve tonight. The first is from the Committee of the Whole meeting from June 8, 2020. Are there any changes or passes? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
By Trustee LaBedz, seconded by Trustee Padovani. Any further questions or comments from the board or the audience? Seeing none, roll call.
Trustee LaBedz.
Yes.
Trustee Padovani.
Yes.
Trustee Baldino.
Yes.
Trustee Canty.
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg.
Yes.
Trustee Tinaglia.
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck.
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes. Next is the village board meeting minutes from our meeting on June 15th, 2020. Any changes or passes?
Move approval.
Motion to approve by Trustee Rosenberg, seconded by Trustee Baldino. Any questions or comments from the board or from the audience? Seeing none, roll call.
Trustee Rosenberg.
Yes.
Trustee Baldino.
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz.
Yes.
Trustee Canty.
Yes.
Trustee Padovani.
Yes.
Trustee Tinaglia.
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck.
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes. And finally, the Committee of the Whole meeting minutes from our meeting on June 29, 2020. Any changes or passes?
Pass.
Passed by Trustee Baldino.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion to approve by Trustee Rosenberg, seconded by Trustee Canty. Any further questions or comments from the board or from the audience? Seeing none, roll call.
Trustee Rosenberg.
Yes.
Trustee Canty.
Yes.
Trustee Padovani.
Yes.
Trustee Tinaglia.
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck.
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz.
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes. We move on then to the approval of the accounts payable, and I call on Trustee Rosenberg.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd move approval of the warrant register with a check date of June 30th, 2020 in the amount of $2,901,512.48.
Second.
Second. Motion by Trustee Rosenberg, seconded by Trustee Tinaglia. Any questions or comments from the board? Anything from the audience? Seeing none, roll call.
Trustee Rosenberg.
Yes.
Trustee Tinaglia.
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck.
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz,
Yes.
Trustee Baldino,
Yes.
Trustee Padovani,
Yes.
Trustee Canty,
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes. Well, there being no recognitions or presentations on the agenda tonight, we'll move on then to citizens to be heard. And I am not aware at least, Becky, of any comments submitted in advance. Is that right?
That's correct, Mayor. We did not have any comments submitted prior to the meeting.
Okay, so I do see a couple of hands, at least at this point, from individuals who would like to address items not on the agenda. And just a reminder for those who would like to speak, you are limited to 3 minutes in time. And I will start with the first individual, and that's Paul Scott.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I'm here on behalf of Bridging the Black-White Divide. Normally, we focus on employment of African Americans, especially in the ranks of sworn police officers. It's now 133 years that the village has, it appears, been unable to hire its first Black officer. I saw a village document recently that shared with the community steps taken by the police department to allay fears that the village won't become another Minneapolis. That is, wrestling to control the damage around the death of a Black citizen or visitor, a la the George Floyd case. In that document was a slide referencing CALEA certification. CALEA certification is a big deal. I've been asked to speak on behalf of police agencies around CALEA in the past, and I did so even though it was for a village that I did not live in. Other law enforcement measures were also reviewed in that document. Chokeholds and shooting at moving vehicles are examples of what was shown there. There were line item responses listed next to the concerns that were raised by citizens. Noticeably absent from that community concerns list was the issue that brings Bridging the Black-White Divide here month after month. And that again is increasing diversity in hiring and dealing with the 133-year issue of hiring the first Black officer in the village. In a separate slide showing the 9th priority of the village board for 2020 and 2021 is the discussion of efforts to increase diversity. It says, find new ways to embrace diversity within the community and village government. There are other various and sundry things included in that priority as well. While if this portion of that plan had been run by me, I would have insisted on there being more specificity around the individual items there. I congratulate the village for what it has stated up to this point. I would have recommended something different. I'm convinced that diversity of the type that speaks to our group will be solved once the village becomes a more welcoming place. Being welcoming is not being unwelcoming. It's much more. It's taking deliberate steps, such as highlighting your rich history of diverse residents, apologizing for past transgressions, casting off the old ways permanently through substantive actions aimed at change, and measuring and sharing publicly future success. None of us is responsible for what we were born into that set the stage for many of the ills that continue to visit and demand special rectification, in my view. We inherited the sins of the past. How we deal with them now is what really matters. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Mr. Scott. And next is Elizabeth McKay.
Ms. McKay, you look like you're on mute.
Okay. How's that?
Okay, we got you now.
Should I start over?
Yeah, we didn't get any of it, so please start.
Okay. Oh, you missed a really good part.
All right.
Thank you, Mayor Hayes, for letting me address the board this evening. And thanks to the police department for their comprehensive presentation at your last meeting. I know you're aware of the small percentage of persons of color who live in Arlington Heights, but I'm wondering if you know about the persons of color who work for some of our large employers. I did a little research and there are several. Lutheran Home and Village employs 673 people. Of the persons of color are 50%. Northwest Community Hospital, I think probably our largest employer, employs 4,092 employees. 35% of them are persons of color. They have hired 221 employees from underrepresented populations in the last 12 months. Journeys the Road Home, which serves 787 people, 37% of those people are persons of color. I believe that these people who keep our large employers running need a diverse police force protect them, as do the members of our community. I also have a question. I'd like to know if the village signed the I 8 Can't Wait pledge use of force policies. That's a question.
I'm not sure. Can you repeat the question again, Ms. McKay?
I'm wondering if the village signed the 8 Can't Wait pledge,
Okay.
which is relates to use of force policies.
Sure. We will answer that in just a second. Do you have any other comments?
And just a statement that I wonder if the police department is meeting those standards.
Okay.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Well, sure. And thank you for those comments. And I'm going to have the village manager address your specific question, but let me just address both comments very briefly. I have said this in the past, and I will say it again tonight, that I believe Arlington Heights is a very welcoming place for any and all who want to live or work here. I don't think there's anything that is in place now or has been in place in the past which prevents people of color from living or working in the village of Arlington Heights. Can we do better as a village, both publicly and privately, to try to increase the diversity in Arlington Heights? Yes. And that's why we made it one of the board's top 10 priorities. And it's not an overnight fix, but it's something that we have been working on and will continue to work on to do all we can to make sure that people of any color feel welcome here in the village of Arlington Heights. I don't think we have anything to apologize for here in Arlington Heights, and I am not going to apologize for anything that we are currently doing or not doing or have done in the past. I've been on this village board for almost 30 years now, and I don't think there's anything that we have to apologize for. We can't force people to live or work here. All we can do is make it as welcoming a place to live and work as possible. And I think we've demonstrated that over the years. For the past 2 years, we've been voted the best place to live in the Daily Herald readership area. And just recently, we were voted one of the 25th most livable communities of our size in the entire country, in the entire United States of America, based on a number of livability factors. And so again, I don't think we have anything to apologize for, but we are continuing our efforts to make our village as welcoming as possible. So with that, Mr. Recklaus, can you answer that specific question?
Yeah, I can, and if I could too, I was going to mention just a couple of recent staff efforts because there's been some further developments. But with the question, Ms. McKay, as Chief Pecora indicated with his presentation, we do believe we meet all 8 of the standards that were listed in that program. The only situations where those standards where officers would be able to use force beyond those standards is if the life of the officer is in danger. But with that, we believe we meet every single one of those standards. And as the chief stated, we recently, upon looking at these things based on all the community discussion, actually enhanced our general orders and made it clear that officers have a duty to intervene if there is an incident of an officer using an excess of force, that other officers have a duty to intervene or are expected to intervene on behalf of the department. A couple of other things just to address our general stance and what we're doing. we're going to be interviewing myself, Assistant Manager McCullough, and Human Resources Director Rath. We're going to be interviewing 3 different firms over the next week to help us develop our diversity inclusion audit and plan. This would be a plan that will set out a way for us to take deliberate action on these issues in furtherance of the board's goal of further embracing diversity and inclusion in our community. And these would be a plan for how we can better attract, draw, welcome more candidates to diversify our workforce. That's one thing that's going on in the next week. I myself this morning attended the Chamber of Commerce has a work group that's called Diversity 2020, talking about issues of race, and it's made up of minority and female business owners talking about these issues in Arlington Heights and in the business community. And it was a very interesting, very insightful meeting. And I'm sure if I can, I'd like to attend others. Mary Rath is also attending a symposium in the next week on these issues as well. So it's very much a front burner issue. We're also still in communication with our partner agencies about the establishment of a community conversation on these issues. Hopefully sometime in the next few weeks. We still have to plan it. That may be something that we talk to these 3 consultants about in terms of identifying the format, and that's something that has to be approved by the board. But so this is very much a front burner issue, something that we're taking seriously as part of our weekly work here at the village. Just wanted to point that out.
All right, Trustee Canty.
Yeah, Randy, I wanted to thank you for that update, and I'm glad you're taking it seriously, because I do think that we, like many communities, have a past, a history that we need to understand and reckon with as we move forward. So I think we do a lot of things well in this village, but there's definitely room to grow and to move forward, and I appreciate you guys taking those steps. Historically, we do have some issues though, so I don't think that it's entirely accurate to say that we've always been a welcoming place. And there are a number of books that we can, talk about or advertise, but I do appreciate, Randy, the efforts that you and your staff are taking to bring us forward.
All right, I do see one other hand up, and that's George Motto.
Thank you, Mayor Hayes. I really enjoyed the conversation tonight, talking about issues that, need I say, are obviously difficult. I too agree, Mayor Hayes, that this is a great community, great schools, nice place to live, wonderful park district. It also is a expensive, but not that expensive a community, and well within the range of almost any middle class family that would choose to move here. And so I do appreciate Randy's efforts and trying to move past diversity to inclusion, because I frankly don't understand why our community, being as good as it is, and I'll say again, I chose to retire here, I love it, isn't more appealing and doesn't attract other people, especially people of color. So I think that's a very difficult, it's a very difficult topic. It hurts sometimes to talk about it, and I'm not talking about we should feel guilty. That just is, guilt is just self-serving, I think. But I do appreciate, and the fact that we're looking into the future and going to examine this, I think is wonderful. And I thank you for that, and I thank Randy. On a more specific point related to the coronavirus, I love our open air dining. However, what I don't love is the lack of masks. As a physician, I'm sorry, I cannot condone, not condone, how can I not condone? I don't understand why people don't wear masks, and I don't understand why our police officers aren't wearing masks. As an example, now that's an observation, not a criticism. So anyway, so I think that should be looked into. But again, the overall plan to improve diversity, but more importantly, inclusion. Diversity is easy. We have diversity at our hospitals. I mean, at our main employers. Inclusion is the word that we don't have. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Motto. Is there anyone else who'd like to address the board on items not on the agenda? All right, seeing none. Randy, do you have just a quick comment on the wearing of masks in the alfresco area?
Sure. It is very, very difficult to enforce from a legal standpoint the mask wearing. We encourage it, and the main step that we can take is to ensure there's enough space and social distancing for folks. There is enforcement that's available for people who are wearing masks, not wearing masks indoors, and most restaurants and businesses are doing that themselves. And if a restaurant or business has a customer that won't leave or refuses to wear a mask, the police will get involved in that. As far as village employees, the village has a policy for village employees working outdoors, such as the police officers. If they believe they're going to be within 6 feet of another person, then they are to wear masks. If they're not to be if they aren't going to be or can safely keep themselves more than 6 feet away from folks out in the public, then they don't have to have a mask on, but they have to have it, ready to put on if need be. And so that's generally what our policy is currently. And I think that's generally what we're seeing out in the in the area with our police officers. Because they're out in open air, they can kind of situate themselves. They generally, while they're kind of just on patrol, they don't necessarily wear them, but if they're getting to interact with an individual, generally they will don their mask or face covering before they have interaction if they're going to be within 6 feet.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ecklaus. Seeing no other comments under citizens to be heard, let's move on in the agenda to old business. And we do have 3 items to report out tonight from committee of the whole meetings from earlier evenings. And so from the committee of the whole meeting of June 15, 2020, seeing that trustee Scaletta is not here, can I call on trustee LaBedz to make the motion? Robin?
Yes, of course. I move to accept the comprehensive annual financial report as presented on the meeting of June 15th, 2020.
Need a second?
Second.
Motion by trustee LaBedz, seconded by trustee Schwingbeck. Any questions or comments from the board?
Mayor, just to clarify, that's for the year ending December 31st, 2019.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the board or anything from the audience? Seeing none, roll call.
Trustee LaBedz?
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck?
Yes.
Trustee Padovani?
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg?
Yes.
Trustee Tinaglia?
Yes.
Trustee Baldino?
Yes.
Trustee Canty?
Yes.
President Hayes?
Yes. And for the next motion, let me call on trustee Canty.
I move tonight, as I did before, that the committee of the whole recommend to the village board that the board approve the proposed 2021 to 2025 capital improvement program, and that the first year of the program totaling $34,128,700 be incorporated into the village's proposed 2021 budget.
Second.
Motion by trustee Canty, seconded by trustee Padovani. Any questions or comments from the board? Anything from the audience? Seeing none, roll call.
Trustee Canty?
Yes.
Trustee Padovani?
Yes.
Trustee Tinaglia?
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg?
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz?
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck?
Yes.
Trustee Baldino?
Yes.
President Hayes?
Yes. And finally, let me call on trustee Rosenberg.
Thank you, Mayor. I would move tonight, as I did the committee of the whole meeting of June 29, 2020, to accept recommend to the village board that the board approve the 2021 budget ceiling of $79,861,000 for the general fund and $24,350,600 for the water and sewer fund for the upcoming year, giving us a tax levy of 0% again.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Rosenberg, second by Trustee Tinaglia. Further questions or comments from the board? And Randy, if you could just explain a little bit about what we're doing tonight and the roadmap to get us to approval of a final budget and final tax levy.
Sure. The action taken tonight is what we call our budget ceiling vote. And before we get too deep into the budget process as staff, we always like to discuss with the board the basic parameters of where we think we're going to be from a revenue and expenditure standpoint. And this year is, we know, is going to be a tough year because of the revenue loss due to the coronavirus downturn. And we're anticipating that next year will be difficult as well. We're taking many steps to reduce expenditures. We're leaving some positions unfilled, moving some money around, and putting off some capital when we can. But one thing that the board was very clear on, and that staff has figured out a way to put in this preliminary budget ceiling plan, the one value is that we need to try to keep property taxes as low as we can keep them. Even though we're only about 12% of a resident's property tax bill. And we know that probably the best stimulus that we can provide is to not take as little money out of residents' pockets as we can. And so the plan includes a 0% increase in the village's property tax levy. This would be the second year in a row that we've been able to do this. It is not something we're going to be able to do every year. But given what we're facing, the board made it clear that was something that they wanted, and staff will plan for the budget accordingly with that goal in mind. We still have a lot of the year left to plan for, and there certainly could be unforeseen things that make us difficult to do this or more difficult. But that is our goal at this point to do so. And the regular budget discussion will be taking place in November, as it usually does, and the budget document is yet to be developed. It's usually made public sometime in October. But yeah, we'd be happy to entertain any questions that anyone may have.
Well, thank you, Mr. Ecklaus, for that brief report, but more importantly, for all the hard work under your leadership and the leadership of Tom Keeney, our finance director, and his whole team, and all of our department heads and members of their teams for sharpening their pencils and getting us to this point in the budgetary process. So we've got a great team, and we're very appreciative of all the hard work that they've done to this point in the budgetary process. So seeing no other questions or comments from the board or from the audience, we do have a motion and second. Roll call.
Trustee Rosenberg.
Yes.
Trustee Tinaglia.
Yes.
Trustee Canty.
Yes.
Trustee Padovani.
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck.
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz.
Yes.
Trustee Baldino.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Right, then we move on to the consent agenda. Are there any members of the board who wish to remove an item on the consent agenda? Trustee Canty?
I do. I'd like to pull item A.
Okay, that's item A, the ordinance amending chapters 16 and 18 of the Arlington Heights Municipal Code regarding prohibited nuisances and negligent or distracted driving and administrative hearings. So
Yes.
that shall be removed. Any other items to be removed from the village board? Anything from the audience? Any members of the audience wish to remove an item on the consent agenda? Seeing none, are there any members of the board who wish to vote no or pass on any remaining items on the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion for approval of the remaining items.
Move
So
approval.
moved.
By motion to approve the remaining items by Trustee Canty, seconded by Trustee Padovani. Roll call.
Trustee Canty,
Yes.
Trustee Padovani,
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg,
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz,
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck,
Yes.
Trustee Baldino,
Yes.
Trustee Tinaglia,
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes. Well, the item removed was a legal item, and so we'll take that under legal if there's no objection. And we'll move on then to new business. And we do have one item under new business. That's the Paragon Mechanical request for a land use variation and rezoning for the property located at 2400 South Arlington Heights Road. Is the petitioner present? I do see a number of representatives. Mr. Polka, will you be the spokesperson, at least initially?
Yes.
Okay. If you just introduce yourself for the record, and we'll let you proceed with your presentation.
I'm sorry, do I go first?
Yeah, we're going to have you go first, if you would.
Well, okay, thank you. I wasn't aware. I'm not sure when it's ready. My screen is changing. Good evening. Thank you for taking the time to be here tonight. My name is Kevin Polka. I'm a resident here in Arlington Heights for the past 11 years. My wife's name is Marta Polka, who's a great mother and wife and a terrific school psychologist. I have a son, Dominic, who's 11, and a daughter, Olivia, who's 9, all living here in Arlington Heights. For the past several years, I've redeveloped some property in Arlington Heights. We've purchased some single-family homes, done additions to them, and changed the value of them from 300 to 700 and above. I own and operate Paragon Mechanical, which is a local HVAC business here in Arlington Heights for the past 10 years. Previously, I was located down the street at 11 North Arlington Heights Road, where we went through a very similar process and successfully operated out of there with no complaints. Had very similar suggestions from the board at that time and again, met all those obligations for 10 years with no problems. And now we're looking to grow. Paragon Mechanical is a specialty HVAC company. We focus primarily on high efficient products and systems. Our specialty is hot water systems with a focus on great customer service, 100%. We do many innovative systems for both residential homes and large commercial building owners. Our customers are people that are looking to build great energy efficient heating and cooling systems for their home or their office or their building. We have always been experts on innovative products such as tankless water heaters, condensing boilers, solar, hot water, geothermal, and more. We not only know the products, but our team knows the systems as well. Over the years, I've been extremely fortunate to say that I've built a successful team, which is why we are here today. I can say with confidence, my team is extremely great at what they do. And so this is what I'm asking for today, as far as the rezoning and the ability to redevelop this property, is not only for myself, but also for my team. We all want to be able to be part of something great. And this proposed redevelopment and new headquarters is something that all of us can partake in and be proud of for many, many generations to come. I was told that during this meeting, I could ask for Mr. Perkins to screen share. And if I could at this time, I'd like for Charles Perkins to put up the rendering of the drawing of the building that we propose, and then I'll continue.
Charles, can you make that happen?
Yes, I'll be glad to.
Okay.
Thank you. There's another one that, can you show that one up in the top corner?
Yeah, this is the only rendering that I have in the presentation.
So you have a link to the rendering where there's like 4 different pictures and it shows a welcome to Arlington Heights. It's very similar to this.
I don't have that.
I think that was the one on the screen before.
Yeah, this is all I have in the PowerPoint presentation. We had asked for any materials to be sent to us by 10 o'clock this morning that you wanted to show. And I know Sam Hubbard had followed up a few times today. So I don't have anything other than what's in this PowerPoint presentation.
Sure, it's in the conceptual renderings phase 2. So it's in you already have it. It was part of the package. It is the 5th link down. So when you go to the links that we've provided.
Charles, I believe he means it's in the Novus link. It's in the submitted materials. You can find it in there. Is that correct?
Okay.
It's labeled conceptual rendering phase 2. Thank you.
Yeah, you just have to bear with me. I'm going onto the website right now.
Yeah. So that. So is that, am I still on?
Yeah, we got you. Please proceed.
Okay, thank you. So what you see in front of you is a rendering of what we want to do with the property. One of the purposes of us being here today is we agree with the village's plan to redo the South Corridor. This rendering shows what we intend on building, in which we will incorporate as the corporate hub for Paragon Mechanical. It's a magnificent building that can be a great gateway into Arlington Heights, showing a successful and innovative business that's flourishing. It is a goal of I know it's a goal of the board to redevelop the South Corridor. And I think that a project like this could be the catalyst for the redevelopment of this South Corridor. I know that it is not ideally the perfect scenario of what the board is looking for, whether it be a restaurant, a hotel, or a strip mall. But I think that given the times like this, in the state of affairs that we're in, I can assure you, because we do business with those types of businesses, that the likelihood that they would come in, purchase this property and develop it the way that we're proposing is probably very unlikely. Our wallet, unfortunately, is not infinite by any stretch. We have to work for every dream that comes our way, and thankfully, we have not failed yet and don't intend to. We look forward to building and developing this piece of property into this beautiful, iconic entry into Arlington Heights. I realize that the village's aspirations may be a little bit different. However, keep in mind that none of those proposed ideas made an offer on this property, but we did. And we're here now. And I know that with your guys' support, that we can make this, again, the catalyst for redeveloping the corridor. So please consider the following amendments to the village's recommendations. And I'm assuming, and forgive me for not knowing, I was told that the board was going to go first and I was going to go second, but I'm assuming that the recommendations are as written on the website, of which there's 7. 1, we ask that you approve the rezoning for Paragon Mechanical to be in this location. And there's 7 different recommendations that the board is going to make. Most of them we agree with. They're great recommendations. There's some that, in particular with the vehicles, we just need clarification. But there's 2 very important considerations we ask you to think hard about that we really need additional consideration for. And that is that there's a proposed landscape plan. We simply ask that, given the state of affairs, that we put off the proposed landscape until 2 years from now. And at which time, when we present the plans for redevelopment to the village, that we incorporate all the landscape redevelopment into the proposed property. Keeping in mind that I've shared with and you have attached budgets for landscape that the village is wanting us to do right now that are in excess of $70,000, I think it's $63,000. That is money that can be put towards the plans for redevelopment to present to the board. A project like this is not going to happen quickly. It's going to take time to make it work for Paragon Mechanical and make it work for the community and make it work for the village. There's going to be back and forths. So I just simply ask that if we can't present plans that the village finds acceptable within 2 years, then we'll do the full landscape that they're asking about, no problem. But we have every intention of going forward with this, and we simply just ask for a little bit extra time, given the state of affairs that are going on right now, 2 years, at which time, if we don't present a full set of plans that are viable set of plans, that we will proceed with the full landscape that they're asking. The other thing that I'm asking is that item number 6 in the recommendations, they're asking that we be limited on signage. I beg you, I implore you to not limit us on signage. The village of Arlington Heights has already a very stringent sign code. I know it from being over at 11 North. I know it from other business owners. There's no reason why we should be any more restricted than the code already states. The property value needs to be harnessed so we can build funds to develop this site the way it should be. Beautiful, a great iconic site for entering in Arlington Heights, which I think you can see here. We need the signage to be off of Arlington Heights Road. Now, I get that we can't get the billboard. I don't think that that's within the code. And again, I'm not asking that, but I'm certainly asking for, we have every means to put the signage along the tollway, along the side of the building. That's within the code. I ask that you simply say that our signage regulations will not be any more restrictive than the code already is. So, and then the other things certainly we absolutely agree to, but I guess I'll let the village go now, and then hopefully I can see what they have to say. I'm not sure if they're going to change it at all, but I thank you. I hope you see that this could be great for the community, and I look for you guys' support so that we can make this happen.
All right, thank you, Mr. Polka. And just for clarification for the record, the items that you talked about, the recommendation and conditions were from the Plan Commission following a public hearing. So it is a village entity, of course, but just I want to clarify for the record that those conditions came from the Plan Commission after a public hearing and due deliberation by a 6-3 vote. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Perkins.
Thank you. Everybody hear me?
We got you now.
Okay. So good evening. Paragon Mechanical is requesting a number of zoning actions. First, they're requesting a rezoning from R1 residential district, and a portion of the property is zoned B3 general service district to a B2 zoning district. And then the main part of their request is a land use variation to allow a contractor shop in the B2 district. And in 2010, Paragon did submit and received a similar land use variation request for 11 North Arlington Heights Road. That particular property is just north of the Village Hall and has a small 4 or 5 space parking lot in the rear where they were allowed a couple of vehicles to park, but they were not visible from Arlington Heights Road. So this property is right off the I-90 tollway. It is kind of a gateway site to Arlington Heights. Anyone exiting the westbound I-90 at the exit ramp immediately sees this property. There is a traffic signal into the property at the exit ramp that also allows left turn northbound movements from Arlington Heights Road as well. It was formerly the Elk Grove Township property and has been zoned R1 for the most part of it, with a little bit of B3 since it was annexed into the community in the 1960s and 1980s. So the property as it sits today is the former Elk Grove Township office building on the south. They have a salt dome there, and then the children's kind of safety school on the north part of the property. The plan submitted by Paragon, this is the floor plan. So they're proposing to reuse the existing building. The southern portion highlighted in red is their offices. The area kind of highlighted in orange just above that is unoccupied office space. The area in blue is a large open area that they're saying they'll use for a training facility. And then in the back of the building, they have large storage areas where vehicles could be stored, and that was how Elk Grove Township used the property. From a parking point of view, we've just viewed and reviewed the existing plan. Their phase 2 plan looks attractive, but there are no plans with that. It's just an artist's rendering. There's no floor plan, no engineering plans, no site plan, no square footage. So that plan was not reviewed by the village or by the departments. It's a future concept. So what has been viewed is, the actual reuse of the building for Paragon and their contractor shop. This was the rendering that was described earlier. The recent history, so in 2017, the village sent a letter to Elk Grove Township advising them that the majority of the property was zoned R1 and that any future user would need to rezone the property, and that the highest and best uses would be for a hotel, office user, or some appropriate commercial use. As we understand it, in December of 2017, Paragon acquired the property in an auction. In February of 2018, vehicles were observed parked on the site. There's no business license, and Paragon was operating out of the 11 North Arlington Heights Road property. The building department was notified to follow up with code enforcement. In April 2018, top left image, you can see at least 4 Paragon vehicles parked on the property right at the entrance to Arlington Heights Road from the exit ramp of the I-90 tollway. Again, in June of 2018, vehicles were parked on the property. After being approached, Paragon did submit a preliminary letter and went before the Conceptual Committee on June 27th, 2018. That's a subcommittee of the Plan Commission that talks about preliminary plans for proposed reuse in the community. The illegal parking of vehicles was discussed at length at that June 27th, 2018 meeting. In July, the building department made contact with Paragon, informing them again that their vehicles were parked illegally and they continued to on the property. In 2019, on July 31st, Paragon trucks were observed parked on the property, and at this time, Paragon's website indicated that their new location was at 100 South Arlington Heights Road. Again, the appropriate zone, and they did not have a business license for this location. On August 1st, 2019, a violation ticket was created, and the building department contacted Paragon employee on site and notified them that a business license was required. This action took place again by the building department on August 5th, 2019, August 7th, and August 9th, and August 12th of 2019. On August 13th, Paragon vehicles, were observed that there were no Paragon vehicles on the site, and the violation notice was closed. On October 2019, it parked again on the property. And it was not until February of this year that Paragon submitted for their zoning request. At that same time, as the board's aware, the village embarked on a study of the South Arlington Heights Road corridor. That began in the summer of 2017 with a meeting with the hoteliers and businesses along this corridor. They indicated that the corridor was a poor representation of the community. It was blighted and unkept corridor, and the businesses asked for code enforcement to improve the corridor. In May of 2018, the village board adopted the South Arlington Heights Road corridor plan that sets forth goals and standards to improve the existing conditions which detract from the overall functioning corridor. In July of 2019, an overlay zoning district was approved for the southeast of Algonquin Road and Arlington Heights Road immediately across the street in order to assist and try to facilitate and spur redevelopment. And then in the fall of 2019, consultants were retained to study the area for a potential tax increment financing district. And last month in June 2020, the board approved the TIF district for 42 acres along South Arlington Road. And this property is one of 5 or 6 sites that were identified as potential for redevelopment. In June of this year, these are some images of the condition of the property. Grass has not been cut at that time. There were some dead or dying trees in front of the property. So while Paragon has been a great business in the community, a contractor shop at this location and not having this property maintained properly has been a negative impact on the corridor. Our first priority, and these are the criteria for the variation that I won't read at this point, but be happy to talk about. So the extract from the plan talks about long-term vision for this property, that it is a gateway site looking for enhanced landscaping, improved pedestrian connectivity along this area, and the potential for redevelopment of this site. The first priority would be to see this site maintained and cleaned up and maintained in a good manner. The second priority would be to see the site redeveloped. The phased landscaping plan is very minimal. It calls for a small row of shrubs along Arlington Heights Road to screen the parking lot, and a few landscape islands added in the area in front of the building, this area here. The estimate that Paragon provided at $63,000 was for phase 1 and phase 2 landscaping. And based upon our landscape architect, they feel it could be done for significantly less than that, than what's been proposed. So the Staff Development Committee made their recommendation to the Plan Commission. And the recommendation was twofold. First, to approve to B2, the second, to deny the land use variation for a contractor shop. It was felt that a contractor shop was not an appropriate use in this district, that these are the uses that are allowed in more manufacturing type businesses, districts, and was not consistent for the South Arlington Heights Road corridor or the village board's strategic priorities to improve this as a gateway to the community. The Staff Development Committee did provide a series of recommendations should the Plan Commission and Village Board wish to recommend approval of this. And that is what the Plan Commission concurred with. They concurred and made a recommendation for approval with a 6-3 vote to approve the land use variation for Paragon only, and based on no outdoor storage, and that vehicles be parked in the rear of the building not visible from Arlington Heights Road. With respect to signage, staff is recommending no sign on the frontage road. Excuse me. That would be misleading to customers because there is no access point onto the frontage road. We're recommending a monument sign of 6 feet in height, which would be visible underneath the power lines and the other signage in that area. And then the village has restricted signage in a number of other situations in the community. A few options for the board to consider. One would be to concur with the Plan Commission's recommendation and approve the petition with the recommendations. The second would be to concur with the Staff Development Committee recommendation and deny the land use variation request. Excuse me. And the third would be to approve the petition per the Plan Commission recommendations with an additional condition number that within 2 years of ordinance approval, the petitioner shall submit a complete Plan Commission application and redevelopment plan for the property. If no application is submitted and subsequently approved, the land use variation shall become null and void. And the reason for this is the proposed phase 2 vision that Mr. Polka referenced. We have no plans for that at this point. So there is no timeline, there's no preliminary engineering plan, site plan, or anything of that nature. This would give the petitioner 2 years to demonstrate that they can maintain the site in a clean and orderly manner without the vehicles parked on the frontage, which they have done for the last 2 years, and to demonstrate to the village that they can be a good business partner from that point of view, and also give them the time to prepare the plans and submit the application for their vision phase 2, and we can work with them on that. I apologize for my throat, losing my voice a little bit, but I'll be happy to answer any questions.
All right, Charles, you want to take that, the slides down just so I can see the board? Thanks. Just a couple of questions, I'll turn it over to the board. First, on the property maintenance, you've got a number of pictures of the islands within the roadway, I think. I can't really tell from these, but that's not the responsibility of Paragon to maintain those, is it?
No, they would only be responsible for any landscaping on their property.
Right, okay. I just want to clarify that. And I do like that third recommendation that you just put up, because one of my main questions was, what assurances do we have that phase 2 is ever going to be built? And so, you know, I'd be more inclined to approve this if I had some assurances that we would eventually see something like they are very conceptually proposing under phase 2. So I kind of like that requirement that you've suggested there. And then the last question I had, Charles, was regarding the Staff Development Committee's recommendation. Are you saying that you would like us to go ahead and rezone this property even if we deny the specific request for the land use variation?
I think that Staff Development Committee didn't object to the rezoning portion, to rezone from R1 and B3 to B2. The other option would be to leave it as it is and just deny the project.
Yeah, I don't see a lot of sense in doing that, just approving the rezoning now because we don't know what else might be approved, but that's just my 2 cents. So with that, I'll turn it over to the board for questions. Trustee Tinaglia.
Thanks, Mayor Hayes. Charles, just a couple of real quick questions.
how did this get zoned R1 in the first place? I'm looking at that site map and I don't see R1 anywhere around it. Any history on that you can share with us?
Yes, historically, when properties have been annexed into the community, they are zoned to the lowest classification that we have, which is R1, until somebody submits a redevelopment plan or a petition to rezone. So when the property was annexed in 1964 and 83, I think, it was automatically zoned R1, and there's been no application to rezone since then.
And when the township purchased it, or what was the timeline for that occupation there?
I believe the township already occupied the building when the building was annexed. So the building portion was annexed in 1983. The area north where there's the little kids driving school area, that was annexed in the 60s.
I see. But you would agree there's no other R1. This is a technicality on the R1 because, as you said, it was brought into the annexation process under the most strict conservative classification of R1. I mean, it's not because we're in an R1 neighborhood.
Correct.
And that's why you are advocating for rezoning it, or I shouldn't say advocating, you are not arguing the rezoning of it to B2 because it's reasonable to do that.
That's correct.
Okay, good. So are there any other contractor shops in a B2 district in our Arlington Heights that you're aware of? The reason I ask that is you're pointing out that it's not allowable in B2. Can you think of any other examples that we already have this scenario playing out?
The only one that I'm aware of off the top of my head is the Paragon. They were in 2010 received approval, land use variation for a contractor shop at 11 North Arlington Heights Road.
That's next door to the park, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
It was a two-story building there, right?
Two-story building. That's correct.
Okay. And this was purchased in auction?
We've been told that the petitioner acquired it in an auction. I'm not sure whether it's an auction or a bid, but so I could be mistaken.
Okay. Is Mr. Polka available to answer that question? Was it purchased in auction, and how long ago did that happen?
It was purchased in a public bid, and it happened about a year and a half ago. I don't know the exact date. When we purchased it, there was the township was supposed to have moved out into a new building that they were fixing up, and it got delayed significantly, unexpected to everybody, to the township and to us. So there was, it was a public bid.
I'm a little confused because I'm looking at, I'm recollecting Charles's photographs with the parking. And I thought I heard him say that some of those photographs were from 2017 or certainly 2018. And now we're at 2020. So between 2 and 3 years of parking on there with the vans. Charles, can you clarify that timeline?
Yes, Trustee Tinaglia, the book we have on file indicates that Paragon acquired the property in December 2019. The first observation of Paragon vehicles parking on the property were in February of 2018, and that continued through to October 2019 last year.
Okay. And did you say that the building department did issue some fines for parking on that illegally at that time?
I don't believe they issued any fines. I think they opened up a violation ticket, but did not issue any fines, to my knowledge.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for that little history lesson there on all of this. It's to me, that's important knowledge. I would say a couple of things. Number one, if you can go back to that rendering with it showed the I guess the existing one on your presentation, Charles, not the the phase 2 approach, but the current one.
Okay, I'll just do the screen share. Was this the one? Just,
yeah. So when I look at that, and we can all agree that that's pretty much existing as is right now, isn't it? Or is there more done to this by getting rid of the little kids driver facility thing? Is that missing on this?
I mean, right now it's kind of it's a 1-story building, so it doesn't really quite look like this. So it's hard to tell exactly whether this is, you know, a 2-story addition or a tear down or redevelopment. Again, we don't have details on this. It's just kind of a conceptual rendering.
In all of that asphalt, is all that asphalt existing?
So here's the site plan. So this is the building configuration on the bottom part of your screen, and then on the top is where the children's kind of safety training school is. They ride around on little bikes and
So,
have
so
a
that
little course to
rendering,
go around.
that rendering is quite a bit different than the reality here. I mean, what you are showing in that rendering there, that is very different than what's there right now. There's no salt dome. There's no little kiddies driver school. There's a 2-story building, or at least a very tall 1-story building. And are you saying that you don't have a full package of submittals with floor plans and everything so we can actually review this?
No, this is all we have. And the other kind of concepts that I showed earlier.
Are we putting the cart before the horse here, Charles?
Well, that was the reason for suggesting the additional condition to give the petitioner 2 years to, you know, actually develop plans to present that are scalable, that can be, you know, looked at and reviewed, stormwater detention, all those kind of things, parking, and also gives the petitioner 2 years to, you know, show that they can maintain the property in the manner that the village would expect to be maintained in.
All right. Well, you know, everybody on this board knows that these types of things are things I deal with every day of my life. And it is a little bit surprising me to come to the realization here that you have a petition here that is dramatically incomplete. We don't have a lot of the pieces of the puzzle to show how things get done, when they get done, and what they will really behave like when they're being utilized in the future. I don't know that I have a huge problem with the use of this site. I mean, if it's done beautifully and if it's landscape, I'm not a fan of all the asphalt. I'll tell you that right off the bat. If I was going to approve this thing, vote if any way in favor of this, there would be landscaping put on this thing in day one. It's an expensive part of the project. I get it, but it makes a huge difference. So I would be really interested in knowing the nuts and bolts of this project, like every other project. There are projects that we run through the ringer to get approvals on that are much larger and much smaller than this. And I'm finding it hard to believe that we would omit that in this case.
Trustee Tinaglia, I mean, the way Staff Development Committee views the request really is a land use variation to occupy the existing building. There have been a couple of concepts, artist rendering or what have you, that are shown on the petitioner's vision down the road, but that's it. There are no plans, there's no details. We did not view that, there was nothing to review. So our recommendation was based solely on the condition of the current building over the last 2 years, and that the petitioner moving in that building with a land use variation. We did not view this as feasible at this time because we don't have anything to review, really.
And your position was denial, right?
We recommended denial of the land use variation.
Yep.
That's correct.
It got a 6-3 vote in favor at the Plan Commission. I went through the minutes, I reviewed that. I guess our board has to decide if it's reasonable to have someone occupy it as is for right now and for how long, if so, before something were to, I guess. It's kind of unfair to look at all these what if renderings because none of that is anything that matters right now. We should really be looking at photographs of the site as it currently sits, because that's what they'll occupy for the next many months or a couple of years even. That's all I have.
Right, thanks, Trustee Tinaglia. Any other comments by the board? Trustee Rosenberg.
Mayor. So I pretty much agree with Trustee Tinaglia on what he said, because if this is going to look like what it is now pursuant to that drawing, I feel much better about it, but not knowing that any of this may happen or some of it may happen. And, you know, I don't think we've ever approved a project like this based upon a concept that isn't even maybe a concept that's on paper or that we've seen drawings on before. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mayor, but I don't think so. So, you know, I'd be a little reluctant to approve this, and especially I can understand Charles wanting the landscaping, but if he's going to redevelop it as such and have to tear out the landscaping, then I don't think it makes sense to put in landscaping now just to temporarily do it and then have to pull it out and start all over again. So I would, if we would approve it, I would almost see some kind of conditional measures put in to accept what we have, and the petitioner only has a certain amount of time to submit his final plans, and otherwise he would have to go forth with something else, and you know, it would revoke what we would pass. And then I have a couple of questions for Mr. Polka. So Mr. Polka, you indicated that you won't be doing any kind of storage or fabricating in your shop. Is that correct?
Hello? Yeah.
Yes.
You know,
we got you.
I appreciate your question. I think I wanted to be clear that what I presented to you was the vision of what we want it to become. It was a unique situation that, keep in mind, the township of Elk Grove has occupied and maintained very well for the last, I think, 35 years.
Right, but I guess what you're not understanding is what we're saying is that we've typically never approved a project based upon a what if.
But I'm not asking for approval of the future project. I realize I have to come back in front of the board for that. Right. I'm asking for your help to get there. The South Corridor needs to be redeveloped. I'm well aware of it. But unfortunately, I just don't have the funds to instantly say, hey, this is what we're going to do right now. there needs to be time in order for it to happen.
Right, but what you haven't given us, excuse me for interrupting, is the fact that you haven't given us a projection of what you're expecting it to look like for the next 2 years, or until you decide you're going to be able to go forth with that as it exists today and how that looks, because all you've given us is renderings on what you think you'd like it to look like in the future, but now how it's going to look for the next 2 years.
Well, for the next 2 years, we would absolutely maintain it the same as the township has for the last 35 years in great, beautiful condition.
Okay, but
our image is important, absolutely, as it is to any business. And we said we're going to park the trucks in the back. And actually, in comment to the truck parking, please understand, the moment I went in, there might have been conversations between people that work for me and the village. But the moment I went in to clarify with the village, there was no more trucks parked out in the front, and there hasn't been since that conversation happened with me and the village. So that should be understood. There was some confusion. We wrote in a lease that was written by lawyers that said
we all read that, but what I guess what we're saying is you have not presented any drawings or any renderings on, so you're basically saying that you're going to use it as it exists today with no changes whatsoever.
Correct, absolutely.
Okay, and no landscaping or anything being done?
Just maintaining of the current landscaping that's there.
Okay.
Now, if we don't present the plans, then we have to move forward with the village's proposed landscape. But like you stated, Mr. Rosenberg, that it doesn't make sense to put money in the landscape and then tear it all down, right? So I've only asked for some time to present the plans, work with the village, them incorporate all the landscape that they want, get a full set of plans, and then go in front of the board again. I mean, this process to date has taken almost 6 months. You know,
right.
Imagine, you know, with a full set of plans, it's going to take some time. And so all I'm asking for is, in order to make that happen and in order to build that vision, because that's what it is. You're right. It's just a vision. Let us come in and operate. We'll be a less of an impact than the village has been for the last 35 years. For the last 35 years, they've operated snow plows out of here. They've operated part of the tollway out of here. They've had buses out of here, the dental department. And I think that will be a much less of an impact, and only for a short period of time until we come up with a cohesive plan of redevelopment.
Mr. Polka, answer these questions. In your facility that you plan on keeping for the next 2 years or so, are you doing any kind of storage or fabricating inside that facility?
There's no fabrication at all.
So you don't do any kind of sheet metal work or anything for, you know, when you, for your installs or anything when you go out to a job?
No, we order it all.
You order it all and it's built on site?
No, it's pre-built from a sheet metal. It doesn't make sense to have a sheet. No, we don't fabricate anything here at all.
Okay. And you won't store any kind of AC or heaters or anything like that in the facility?
No, all of that is stored at the supplier's place and they ship it direct to the facility. Now, do we have thermostats? Do we have smart products? Yes.
Right, you'll have parts, right.
Very small things, but no ACs, no fabrication.
Okay. So can I ask you a question? Why, when you made your submission, that you just didn't present plans as if they were going to be for the next 2 years, as opposed to what you would like it to be?
Well, we did. There is a floor plan that Charles presented. We did submit everything that, you know, I'm not familiar with the process. We did, okay. The village did, and we gave a floor plan.
Okay. All right. That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Other questions from the board? Trustee Schwingbeck.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Polka, just a quick question. Reading through everything, and I appreciate the fact that you've had a business. I'm very pro-business myself. What I'm a little concerned about, and I understand what you're trying to do, you want to use the property as is until you can move forward with phase 2. You have a relatively small company. And what I'm a little concerned about, and I'd like to kind of hear you talk to us about it, is all of the code enforcement violations. I heard you say just a minute ago that you really didn't know that those discussions were going on. You have a relatively small company, but I'd like to know, when the village did approach you, why nothing was changing. Why did the parking continue to be out there? You've owned the property now for a while. I'd like to kind of hear from you on why the landscaping, the grass is as high as it is when you've owned it for a couple of years now. So I'd like to kind of have you talk through these code enforcement violations and why nothing was done.
Thank you for asking that question. It's a good question. And I spoke to Mr. Perkins about this personally. We talked on the phone. In regards to the parking, I don't have a good explanation other than the fact that I just didn't know. And when I met with the board personally, they described it to me. I thought that there was confusion because I I'm dealing with the township of Elk Grove. It's not like a private owner or anything. It's the township that was in here. We wrote a lease that was signed with lawyers, a lawyer, very prominent lawyer from Arlington Heights, and the township lawyer, where within the lease, I wrote that we would park the vehicles out in front. And I thought that that was okay. And I made bad assumptions. But the point is that as soon as I went in front of Sam and the village, and they said, you need to move the trucks to me, the next day they were gone and not another truck was parked out in front. Now, keep in mind that the township was working out of here until just recently. And they actually moved out right in the middle, right when the COVID started happening. There was obviously, understand, a lot of chaos and unknowns. The township was maintaining the property at that time, and we just didn't get a handle on, the maintenance. But we are now, and it's difficult. It's difficult to operate those things. But once we get that started and we hire someone, the property will be maintained beautifully, just as it has. Keep in mind, the grass has been cut and everything has been cut down now, and it will continue to be maintained well. And obviously I know that there's a dead tree and we're going to remove that, and we want to make that beautiful while we're here. Our image is very important. We just don't want to spend $63,000 on landscaping that could go towards the architectural plans. Mr. Tinaglia himself, he knows this type of expense intimately, and so if we can postpone that expense, even if Mr. Perkins feels it can be done less, clearly there's documentation showing that it can cost up to $63,000. We're only saying to postpone that. We'll certainly do all the maintenance, keep it looking the way it's been for the last 35 years, which has been maintained by the township of Elk Grove. And so that we can put all of our efforts and all of our resources into the plans to represent to you, to get the approvals, to have this meeting again, so that we can all approve on the amount of asphalt, the wind turbine, all the landscaping and all those things. But right now we just need to move in and operate our business as it is right now, as the township has had it for the last 35 years without any changes, other than it'll have a lesser impact on the community.
Yeah, and I'm not pushing to have all the landscaping done now. I'm trying to just wrap my arms around that if it is approved and there's a series of conditions, that you would agree to those conditions and follow through on them, and not here we are 2 or 3 years down the road and none of it's being done.
Well, that's a really good question. And please take in consideration that I went through the same thing, had very similar conditions, though smaller, but it was the same thing. I had the same conditions: no outside storage, no material storage. We didn't have 3 parking spaces. We had 13 parking spaces. We had very similar conditions when we were at 11 North Arlington Heights Road. And we never had one complaint. We never went back. We never had a problem. And we were right in front of a residential community with apartments that if there was complaints, they would have actually called right away. But so I understand where you're coming from. And I think you just have to take the history, the fact that I am an Arlington Heights resident and I want the same thing that you guys want, and that I have a history that confirms that there were conditions based on our moving into 11 North. There'll be conditions here, and we're going to work through them. And we're going to hopefully get to the point where we're sitting at another meeting talking about what everybody's looking to do, and that is the redevelopment.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Trustee Baldino.
There we go. Thank you, Mayor. I've been struggling with this a little bit, and I agree with many of the comments that the rest of the board has made to this point. I've been struggling with what I want to do versus what I should or could do. So let me start by asking Charles, what other kinds of developments might we see at a property like this? This is in my mind, is a difficult property to redevelop. It's a 2-acre triangular parcel sandwiched in between the interstate and what is that? At that point, isn't that a 6-lane road on Arlington Heights Road there?
That's correct.
So, and I understand that there's signaled access to the property, which makes it easy to get into as long as you're traveling in the right direction. I know that's a four-way stoplight there, isn't there?
That's correct. There's a northbound turn lane into the site as well.
Right. So what kind of redevelopment might we typically see at a property like this that, even with the access, is kind of an odd shape, and it's a small size, it's just over 2 acres? What other kinds of development might we see here?
So just by comparison, it's about 2.4 acres. For comparison, a Walgreens is typically on about 1.2, 1.3 acres. Holiday Inn in that corridor is on 1.4 acres. The Shea Hotel is on 2.6 acres. Raising Cane's, that was just approved up at Town and Country Shopping Center last year, is just over an acre. So, it's a decent sized parcel. The most comparable property in Arlington Heights like this, with similar characteristics, with a kind of a tollway and a main road and a frontage road, would be Walter E. Smith. That's actually on a triangle shaped piece of property, very similar to this. It's got 53 on the west, Rand Road kind of on the north on the angle, and then the frontage road on the kind of east and south. It's a triangular piece of property. So it's very visible. It's got super easy access off the tollway. You've got 30,000 vehicles a day on Arlington Heights Road, 100,000+ vehicles on the tollway. There are many different uses that would be allowable in the B2 district that could be there, including the phase 2 if and when we got plans for that. But we viewed this, the Staff Development Committee viewed this really not as a phase 2 plan. We viewed it, because we don't have those plans, we viewed it as a contractor shop going into the existing building and just kind of viewing what had happened on that property over the last 1.5 years, 2 years, with having trouble getting the vehicles removed from being parked where they shouldn't be parked. And so that was the basis of our recommendation, not anything against Paragon. These types of uses are typically in a manufacturing district.
Sure, yeah. What happens in the past is, as far as I'm concerned, that's in the past. And we're looking to move forward. We're looking to redevelop the South Quarter here. I was just, curious what other kinds of projects we might see here. And I know that they're asking for a variation to allow a contractor shop, but even though it meets the technical definition, it doesn't seem to me to be a contractor shop. I guess I didn't really ask a question. Is that sort of the take of village staff?
It falls under the definition of a contractor shop with offices, the training areas, potentially, I know the one on North Arlington Heights Road, they had a showroom in there. They don't, have materials on site and things of that nature, which is a little different. They do have contractor type vehicles that have been parked on the property. So, in our opinion, they definitely are a contractor shop. They were in 2010 and they are now. And, that was why we presented that third option with the additional condition for the petitioner 2 years to really submit details on the plan to show how they're going to redevelop it and to show how they would comply and meet our requirements in the interim.
Right. Okay. Thank you. So let me get back to my original point. I've been struggling with what I want to do, which is support a current ongoing local business versus, approving a plan that at this point isn't a plan. So I guess the bottom line for me is that I don't think I could support this without the 8th condition or the 8th recommendation that was provided before, to make sure that there's a deadline that says, okay, the village is willing to take a chance on you moving forward with this development. And we're going to put our faith in you, but there has to be some point that is the go, no go decision, where if it's not happening, then we need to be able to go in a different direction. So that's my feeling on it. Thank you, Mayor.
I think Trustee LaBedz was first, then Trustee Canty.
Sorry, I needed to unmute. Thank you, Mayor Hayes. This is also something I've struggled with. I do think it's a very unusual site, even though we do have the Walter E. Smith site as Mr. Perkins described, in a similar unusual thing. And I think that some of the possibilities, a hotel, a Walgreens, a restaurant, I think we would have some struggles with those. We would be dealing with parking issues, parking spaces. The site is similar to the size of the Shea Hotel, but we struggled with the parking plans for that. So that's why, on the one hand, I kind of like this sort of low impact, or what appears to be low impact type of development. I have a question, well, I have several questions, but my first I want to ask about is the parking. And this is for Mr. Polka. If you aren't in this building now, why do you have trucks parked there, and why have trucks been parked there for the last couple of years? I'm a little confused about that. Where do you work from?
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. You know, very good question. We actually talked to Mr. Perkins and the staff and explained that we're more than fine with just having, at any given time or overnight, no more than 2 of our vehicles parked in the back. When I first went in and to the board and asked them, because we had bought the property.
Mr. Polka, can you answer the question posed to you by Trustee LaBedz? Where are you operating out of now?
Oh, we're operating out of our house. We're operating, every tech takes their truck home. So we have trucks parked here. We partially come here and we partially work out of here.
Why do you have trucks parked here then, if you work out of your homes? Is this like a parking lot for you?
No, we have 2 extra trucks, and those 2 trucks stay here out of sight in the back.
And that brings me to my next question in terms of parking out of sight. How out of sight are we really talking about? Because I can tell you, we drove past there on the 4th of July on our way to the tollway, and I could clearly see 2 trucks in the back. Is it possible to park back there without being seen from the roadway?
You know, that's a good question. And we actually showed an aerial footage at the last meeting where absolutely we did an aerial drone footage where you couldn't see the trucks that were parked there. So if you want, we can share that with you now. We just have to screen share. But the answer to your question is absolutely.
So, but they weren't. And so this kind of goes back to the issues of parking problems over the last couple of years, which is a concern. And I wouldn't want to go ahead and approve something expecting the trucks to be out of sight, yet they're not out of sight.
Well, what we were told is that they don't want to be seen from Arlington Heights Road. And you can't see any of the trucks, and you couldn't see, since we were explained that by the village that the goal is they don't want to see them from Arlington Heights Road. Now, if you're getting on the on-ramp and you're up high and looking over things, I mean, maybe you see a truck, but you cannot and have not been able to see the trucks from Arlington Heights Road, which is what the request was to us.
Well, I think you need to look at that again, because I was not on the on-ramp. I was on Arlington Heights Road directly in front of the piece of property. So I think that's something you need to work on. I do also have a question about the landscaping. Maybe Mr. Perkins, if you could share again, the landscaping in the front, there was some discussion about what was the responsibility of the tollway. What is theirs? I mean, appears to be a parkway area, and normally we expect our residents to take care of parkways. Wouldn't we expect a business to do something similar?
That's correct. There's I think there's a concrete but a concrete median divider further in front of the building, with the exception of the left turn northbound lane off Arlington Heights Road. So the only thing we're asking for is a row of shrubs along the frontage to screen the parking area and a few landscape islands. We did have a landscape architect look at the pricing that the petition had provided from a landscape contractor. That number that was quoted, $60-something thousand, was for phase 1 and phase 2. We're just talking about phase 1, which even looking at that particular landscape contractor's estimate was around $32,000. Now, I'm not saying that's not a significant sum, but that's just the phase 1. Our landscape architect felt it could be done for less than that, given prices that we typically receive from landscapers and to do this kind of work. But it would still be in the kind of $18,000 to $20,000 range to do that minimal upgrade, to at least make the front of the building look presentable. We're not talking about anything behind that at this time. That would be part of a future phase.
Sure. I mean, that's a concern to me also, is that the front of it be presentable. Are there any landscape islands at all? I can't recall from driving by.
There are some, there's some foundation landscaping in front of the building, and there's a couple of dead trees. That's a maintenance issue that they need to be removed and replaced. But there are no, actually, I take that back. There's one landscape island at the kind of by the entrance, but other than that, there are no landscape islands on the site at all.
Okay, so the staff recommendation and what the staff was assuming would be or considered would be the cost of about $30,000 or so to do front of building would include building some landscape islands.
It would be, that's correct. It would be a screening of the parking lot along the Arlington Heights Road frontage, and 2 or 3 landscape islands immediately in front of the building.
So what about if, so it was kind of to split the difference, maybe not build the landscape islands, but have some new landscape screening planted? I mean, that would bring the cost down quite a bit if we're talking mostly.
Yeah, that would definitely bring the cost down. The kind of saw cutting of the islands is probably the most expensive part. Mm-hmm. And certainly at the direction of the board, we can work with the petitioner, on, a modified plan. We just felt if it's going to be a contractor shop for some foreseeable time, then the goal of the corridor plan is to improve the corridor. We should at least try to get this particular site improved. That's what we do on every project. When every project, we try to take it as an opportunity to try to get some improvements to improve the particular corridor that the parcel may be on.
Well, I realize that, and I've been doing this long enough to know between the Plan Commission and the Village Board. And I would definitely want to see some improvement made because we really don't know if we go ahead and approve this, if there will actually be the phase 2, I am like like Trustee Baldino, I do like the fact that the 8th condition with a time frame was added. I don't have it in front of me, so I don't remember exactly how it reads, but that would be something that would help me, because otherwise we could still see the existing building for the next decade or so, because maybe the things don't improve enough to put the money into what appears to be a tear down and to build a new building. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Trustee Canty.
I just wanted to say that I agree with Trustees Baldino and LaBedz and you, Mr. Mayor. I like this third option that puts a time limit on how long this variance would be in place. I always want to support our local business owners and encourage people to do business here in the village, but I do think this presents a unique challenge, and having that third option with the expiry period will allow us to support a local business owner and hopefully get the things out of this southern corridor refurbishing, so to speak, that we're looking for as a village.
Thank you. Anybody else from the board? Trustee Padovani.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree also on all the observations of my fellow trustees of option 3 with that time frame. My question is, on the time frame, let's say the economy doesn't get better and Mr. Polka has to continue on with the current structure, so there'll be no plan coming forward. What impacts would happen if he goes beyond that 2-year time frame that we see in that option?
Trustee Padovani, if that were the situation, Mr. Polka would need to then submit, prior to the expiration of that time frame, a request to extend that time frame and the reasons why, and then the village board could consider that at that time.
All right. So in the event that we go all the way out to the 2 years and there's not the money to redevelop the property into the beautiful concept that you're seeing here, knowing that that's the end result, what happens then? Meaning, like, I think it was Trustee LaBedz or one of us said, oh yeah, this could be here for another 10 years. What happens then? Does the petitioner, does the business have some sort of impact on them? Knowing that we want them to keep in business, we don't want to put them out of business in any way, shape, or form. How do we deal with it then?
Well, it's a difficult situation because they basically purchased property without the proper zoning. So the options are to not approve it, to approve it with conditions, to approve it with this additional condition to give them a little more time to present, their phase 2 plan that they've said that they're interested in doing in a couple of years. So that's why we picked the 2 years. But I mean, if it was a developer that acquired the property and it was a plan the board didn't like, they wouldn't approve it. In theory, it's a little more difficult because it's an Arlington Heights business, and they've been a good business in Arlington Heights. They've done a good job at the North Arlington Heights location. And as I said earlier, it's nothing against Paragon. It's just, this isn't really the right location. If they'd have asked us before they purchased it, we'd have said, get a contingency, a zoning contingency on it because there are issues here. They didn't do that. They went ahead and acquired it. So we're trying to, everyone's put in a little awkward position here, especially as it's an existing business. And so our concern is, the image and the vehicles parked on the front, and that's how it's been for the last year and a half. And that was why we suggested let's come up with a 2-year time period. That's what the petitioner said for phase 2. Let's see how the building and the property is maintained, and hopefully you can present the detailed plans at that time. And then as part of that, there may be a time frame to implement after that. He may well put the plans together, go through the zoning process within that 2-year time period, and then there may be a development schedule, which is what we typically get for a developer or somebody to implement that plan. And that would be perfectly acceptable as well.
All right. So what we're faced with then is with this kind of awkward process, we want to get Paragon into using their property with the condition that we see something within 2 years of how they're going to develop the property. And that leaves us with that third option. With the third option in the presentation is probably our best approach here. Would you agree?
Was that a question to me, Trustee Padovani?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's a reasonable approach. That's why we presented it after, I listened and watched the Plan Commission, hearing, and there was some information there that, we hadn't gleaned from with the actual, written and paper, electronic application, so to speak. And so, when we saw, what Mr. Polka wanted to do, and kept saying he wanted to do this in 2 years. So we came up with this approach to give him that time frame to present those plans.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Charles, can you put up that condition, that third condition again, just so there was some language in there that I wanted to address.
Yes, there you go, Mayor.
Right, thank you. So if no application is submitted and subsequently approved, the land use variation shall become null and void. So I'm just wondering exactly what that means legally. They're owner of the property. What are we allowed to do in that event? Either Charles or Ms. Ward or Mr. Recklaus?
Well, I'll start and then anybody else can add. I mean, it would be an enforcement action to have them vacate the property because their land use variation was no longer approved.
Even though they're owner of the property?
Correct.
Any other input from staff on that?
I mean, as a general rule, that's correct. What's happened is they would, in theory, have operated their business for 2 years. And then, however, whatever period of time was involved in them submitting an application and potentially redevelopment plan and go through the process, they would operate their business for all that time. If at the end, either no application is submitted or if an application is submitted and ultimately not approved, they would then, under this condition, no longer be able to, they wouldn't have the land use variation and they wouldn't be able to operate the business that they had been operating for several years at that site.
So if they did not voluntarily leave at that time, if we were to enforce that clause, we would have to bring legal action to get them to cease and desist.
Yeah, and this language probably, I mean, because no application being submitted and subsequently approved, those are sort of two different things. So I think we're going to have to clarify what this is intended to be. Because if the application is submitted, there's no time period for when it has to work its way through the process or they have to develop the property. So all they have to do is submit the application, you can go through the Plan Commission process, get it approved, and then never develop it. I mean, there's no guarantee that that's ever going to go through.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what the goal is with this.
So the goal was, as part of the application in 2 years' time, for example, they would submit an application, a complete application, and their redevelopment plan. They would take, let's say, 4 to 6 months to go through the process, presented to the village board. If the village board approved it at that time, part of that approval would be a time frame for them to commence implementation of that plan, just like many projects we approve have a construction time period. We just approved an extension to one of those a few months ago for a project downtown that had a timeline to commence construction. So the approval, subsequent approval would have that time period and then that would kick in.
Mayor, a question for Robin Ward, just as an analogy. Is this analogous in some ways to hillside towing? in terms of there was a period of time where they had to cease their operations at their location, even though they had been doing it for some time.
It's somewhat similar, but not completely. The difference being that they were given the ability to operate someplace else and just stop where they are. What's happening here is this entity is being given the ability to operate their business out of this location and then submit a plan for approval. So there's no, it's a little bit different. It's not the same because they're going to operate at this location for whatever period of time they do till they submit the plan, whether or not the plan gets approved. If the plan doesn't get approved or if they don't submit it by this term, then the land use variation goes away, but they've been operating the business at that location. There's a slightly different legal implication there.
Yeah, and that's my concern. I like the fact that we're trying to do something to hold their feet to the fire to ensure that phase 2 comes into fruition, but it really puts us in a very bad situation legally, perhaps trying to sue to bring a legal action against this business to get them to cease and desist after they've been operating in that location as is for at least 2 years. And so I would hate to put the village in that situation. I don't think it's something we would really want to do. So with all this considered, and with the fact that it's not consistent with the South Arlington Heights Corridor Development Plan, and with a lot of the other issues that have been discussed tonight, I am really not in favor of this petition at this time. Trustee Tinaglia, did you have other comments?
Yeah, I was just going to make 2 points. One, this is a slippery slope, and I think you just hit the nail on the head, Mayor, and Robin as well. I don't know how. I mean, we have a hard time getting people to put dumpsters in their dumpster enclosures in retail places. Now we're going to go tell somebody they can't operate their business in their building that they've been working in for the last 2 years. I think we're going to be in a bad, awkward position if that were the case. And then the other thing for me is we're spending a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of effort, and there are neighbors up and down this street that are expecting something wonderful to happen here. Lots of investment, lots of energy. And I'm just wondering if we're not selling ourselves short here by doing this now. Is it? And so Charles, did you have any knowledge that this site was going to be up for auction? And I guess the only reason I'm asking that, was there ever an opportunity for you to market or help market this site to a CVS or another small hotel or a restaurant or anything like that? Or were you not aware that that was a potential opening there?
So we had a couple of meetings with Oak Grove Township, and they had hired some brokers to market the property for them. Mm-hmm. We had provided some information to them on zoning and things of that nature, potential uses. We provided them with some names of potential developers. We were not aware that it was going up for auction. We were actually surprised by that. We did get some calls afterwards by some developers that had interest in it, and they were surprised that it went up for auction, and they did not want to bid on it with no contingencies for their proposed use. But we were not aware prior to that I recall that it was going up for auction.
Okay. And my last question, then I'll get off it here. What is happening with the old building, the Paragon? I mean, are you guys still operating out of there at all, or is it just strictly vacant and you're operating out of your homes and parking 2 or 3 trucks at this site? I guess this question is to Mr. Polka.
Thank you for asking. We mostly operate out of our homes, but I appreciate all your guys' comment and feedback, but I can't stress enough that regardless of what you decide, the signage, we need the signage in order to make the building work. So you guys haven't talked about the request for the signage. But if you say, yeah, you can move in, but you can't put a signage up, then, you know, we have to let it stay vacant, right? There's no point to be here and have the expense and go through everything and not be able to put a sign up. There's just not. So if you're at all in it, I don't know which way you're going to be leaning, but if you want this project to happen and you want the property to be redeveloped, you have to let us put the signage up and keep in mind, there's no certainties in anything. A developer comes to you and you approve it. There's no certainties that they're going to develop it. There's none. They can go bankrupt and then the project stops. You're asking for an absolute when there are no absolutes in life. So, but please address the whole signage issue, because if you approve everything, but you say you can't put signage up, that it's like you're not approving it.
Okay, so for me, the signage is not an issue one way or another. Everything in my opinion is about trying to make this a beautiful neighborly component of a future redevelopment of this entire area. This TIF district, everything about it is forward looking and trying to keep everybody who is an investor and a player in this game going down the same path. And I just, frankly, right now, I'm just not so sure this is the right way to go. I won't be supporting this for a few different reasons right now. And I think the only way that I would ever support it is if a full package of development with timelines and drawings and details and schedules and commitments. And then again, the signage for me, I'm good with signage most of the time, as long as it's reasonable.
All right, any other comments from the board? I'm not seeing any. Any comments from the audience? And Charles, can you take down the slide? All right, Mr. Polka, did you have additional comments?
I do. You know, when I first bought this and you guys talked about the South Corridor, I came in front of you, Mr. Hayes, and I had asked you guys if you're open to suggestions. At the end of the day, we're asking for our business to be put here in this location, which fits right. We were told that we were a contractor shop, but we have no materials. We don't fabricate anything. And we said we'd be fine with having only 2 trucks here. And you know what, right now, I know that you might have grandeur ideas of something better, but there's nothing better. It wasn't an auction. It was a public bid. And, you know, nobody's came to me and said, hey, that's a great piece of property. Here's my money. I'll buy it from you. No one. So I get that maybe it might not be the perfect thing like a hotel, but I deal with hotels. I deal with hotels all the time. And you know what they're doing? Nothing right now. No project with hotels. You're in the midst of COVID-19, a pandemic. We're doing a Zoom meeting. I can't even display a presentation to you guys. Understand that the world around you is changing. The idea that a restaurant's going to be there is not going to be a reality. I'm offering to operate the building less of an impact to the community than it's been for the last 35 years, while trying to come up with a plan for redevelopment to make it beautiful. Right now, it's the best thing that you have. You could maybe roll the dice, but you know what? I'm a for sure thing. We can move in. Otherwise, what? It goes vacant. It gets distressed, boarded up. I don't think that that's a good option for the community. I don't know where you live, but I live 5 minutes from here. I don't want to see that.
All right, thank you, Mr. Polka. All right, we do need a motion. What's the will of the board? I assume if there's no motion, Ms. Ward, nothing can happen tonight. Is that correct?
That's correct. If there's no motion, then nothing happens. It just sits unacted on.
Anybody willing to make a motion? I cannot make a motion. Trustee Schwingbeck.
Thank you, Mayor. Charles, could you put up those three options again?
Yes, I'll put them up. Just 1 second. Do you see that?
I can. I would like to motion that we approve the petition per the Planning Commission recommended conditions plus the following additional conditions. So your option number 3, adding 8 with a 2-year of ordinance approval. So
okay, there's a motion by Trustee Schwingbeck. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Trustee Baldino. Any further questions or comments from the board? Charles, you want to take that down so I can see everybody?
Yes.
Any further questions or comments from the board? Trustee LaBedz.
Thank you. If my comment would have to do with the landscape, and that was, no. Oh, number 3, that the staff be able to work with the petitioner for a modified landscape plan if this goes forward.
Well, just for clarification, the condition 3 says phase 1 landscape improvements shall be completed no later than September 30, 2020. They're not required to do phase 2 landscape improvements until no later than September 30, 2022. So he's not required to do $63,000 of landscaping right off the bat. Recommendation.
I understand that, but when I was speaking earlier, and Charles was saying that, well, I guess my concern was maybe not every single landscape island needs to be put in at this point, but definitely some landscaping in the front and replacement of dead trees or dying trees. I would think that the petitioner would want to see some beautification of his property.
Okay. Well, if there's no other comments, my only additional comment is that if I had assurances that phase 2 would be built and we would get there and we had something more concrete than we have this evening, I would be more inclined to vote in favor of this. But I just unfortunately feel that phase 2, at least in my mind right now, will not be built within the next 2 years or any time after that. And I don't feel comfortable with the provision in the additional condition, item 8, because I think it puts us in a bad position as a village to have to sue one of our business owners. So what you're going to be putting in there now, if this is approved, is not something that I envision for the long range plan for that piece of property. I don't think it's in the best interest of that piece of property or our community in general in that condition. So without assurances that phase 2 would be built or a reasonable mechanism for us to ensure that it happened, I cannot vote for this motion. So Trustee Baldino, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say that I, for one, heard Mr. Polka when he was talking about the signage thing, but at the end of the day, all we have for not putting these conditions in for the signage is a rendering, and a rendering is not a plan. So we don't know what is and is not in code. There's no basis for making a decision on that. So I just wanted to say that we heard you, but I am supportive of the recommendations in item number 6 from the Plan Commission. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, no other comments from the board. I see nothing from the audience. So we have Mr. Polka, one last comment.
You know, what I had stated in the beginning was only that I get the permission to have the signage according to the current code and no greater of a restriction. Right now, I'm getting a greater restriction than the code is already written. And that's what item 6 is. And keep in mind, even though I don't have plans for phase 2, I just want to move in as it is right now. I'm not asking you to approve phase 2. That's a whole other process. But in order to make phase 2 happen, you have to say move in. Otherwise, it will go vacant. It was an open bid. No one bid on it. No one gave an offer. You think it's great, but no one's putting their money towards it. And the signage, all I'm saying is that I want to be held to the letter of the law and no greater. Right now, item 6 holds me to a higher standard of signage than what is written in the code.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Trustee Schwingbeck,
Yes.
Trustee Baldino,
Yes.
Trustee Canty,
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg,
No.
Trustee LaBedz,
Yes.
Trustee Padovani,
Yes.
Trustee Tinaglia,
No.
President Hayes.
No. So what was the final vote, Becky? 5?
That was 3 noes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 yeses.
Okay, so the motion carries. And so it is the Plan Commission recommendation with the additional condition condition 8, which was proposed by staff. So any further questions or clarifications? All right, seeing none, good luck to you, sir. Mr. Polka, do you understand what happened?
No, I'm not.
Well,
clear.
the board concurred with the Plan Commission recommendation, but added that one additional condition that was proposed by staff this evening, that you have 2 years.
But what about the signage?
Well, there was no change to the Plan Commission recommendation in the
Then
sign.
then you guys handcuffed me. You asked me to invest millions into a property, millions, and yet you said I can't put a signage up. The plan clearly stated that, oh, I'm held to a higher standard of signage. Why can't I put signage up on the tollway? The taxes are $150,000 a year. And for what? Because you're right by the tollway. You said Walter E. Smith gets a B by 53. Perkins said that I get the traffic going by the tollway. Why can't I put the sign up? Guitar Center has the sign up on.
All right, Mr. Polka, I'm going to have to cut you off. We did vote on this. This was fully vetted at the Plan Commission hearing as well. And the board has concurred with that part of the recommendation. So good luck to you. All right, there being no other new business, we move on then to the legal item that was removed from the agenda. And Mr. Recklouse, why don't you introduce that item?
Sure, Mayor. This is kind of a cleanup of our code. Among other things, we are getting rid of the provision in the code that says it's unlawful to leave a horse or other draft animal untended on any street or highway. That's how old this is. But we're also adding language to make this section compliant with Americans with Disabilities Act. And the one section in question was kind of making it more clear that it is illegal and what constitutes negligent or distracted driving. There was a question by Trustee Canty about kind of the clarity of that section earlier today and whether we needed to add more specificity to that section. Upon review, legal looked at it and decided to provide some examples of what distracted driving may include. And so there was a revised version of this ordinance emailed to the board this evening. But basically, the only thing that's added is it says, examples of distracted driving include, but are not limited to, using a cell phone, eating, reading, and using in-vehicle navigation systems. I don't know if Ms. Ward would add anything to what I just said, but I think it's relatively straightforward.
Yeah, I agree. It was just to make it a little bit clearer, Trustee Canty's suggestion as to the types of things that might qualify as distracted driving.
Right,
So that
Trustee
last sentence is the only thing that's different from what was published on the agenda in the first place.
Okay, Trustee Canty, anything to add?
No, the memo I thought had made it more clear what the intent was of this section of the code. And so that's why I reached out and asked Robin if we could just clarify it actually within the code itself. And so the way that sentence has been added, I'm comfortable with the language of all three sections, and I would move that we approve them.
Second.
Okay, motion by Trustee Canty, seconded by Trustee LaBedz. I agree that it makes sense to add those specific examples, so I think that's a good change. Any further questions or comments on all of these changes? Anything from the audience? Seeing none, roll call.
Trustee Canty?
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz?
Yes.
Trustee Padovani?
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck?
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg? Trustee Rosenberg?
Yes.
Trustee Baldino?
Yes.
Trustee Tinaglia?
Yes.
President Hayes?
Yes. Thank you. No other legal items. Report of the village manager, Mr. Ecklas.
Nothing further this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Just under petitions and communications, we had a 4th of July holiday weekend the last few days. I think everyone made the best of the situation. I know I had a really nice day. I think a lot of people were celebrating on their own and made the most of the situation. So I hope everyone had a great 4th of July. Any other questions or comments from the board under petitions and communications? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Who made the motion? Trustee Baldino, seconded by Trustee Canty. Roll call.
Trustee Baldino?
Yes.
Trustee Canty?
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz?
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg?
Yes.
Trustee Padovani?
Yes.
Trustee Tinaglia?
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck?
Yes.
President Hayes?
Yes. We are adjourned, and thank you for joining us this evening. Have a good week.